welcome to the Mindful Marketer Livestream. I'm Lisa Nirell, episode 44. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Leaders in Action. And we're going to be hearing from Bill Connolly later in this show. I'm just so glad you're here, and we'd love for you to tell us where you're from in the live chat. We are simulcasting this throughout the web sphere to YouTube, LinkedIn Live, and Facebook. We'll also be able to broadcast this on our podcast page, wherever you get your podcasts. Hello, Peggy, and welcome from Boston. I can see people coming in now, and you're all welcome. So let me ask you this. Are you the Pied Piper of persuasion, or are you petering out behind the screen? I want you to take a look at a company that really models positive persuasion in any economy and in any work environment. Canva is a company who took on the titan of design known as Adobe and is winning market share, and not just market share, they're winning mind share. This Australian company led by Melanie Perkins really, to me, is a role model for the power of visual leadership. And here is a quote from co-founder Melanie Perkins that pretty much positions and gives you context for today's show. Her quote is, "It should not matter where you are in the world, your economic status, or your skills and your experience. Everyone should have the ability to design." And so today we are going to be designing something really powerful for you, which is to give you some new ways that you can design messages using the power of visual leadership. Now, you also, by the way, you're probably wondering, am I a paid spokesperson for Canva? The answer is no. I'm actually a friend of Guy Kawasaki, who made an early bet on Canva. And now with their $40 billion valuation, he's probably celebrating with a day off for surfing. But today our guest is Todd Cherches. He is a sought after NYU professor, TEDx speaker, fellow author of this book, which is Visual Leadership, a must read. And more than that, he's also a fellow member of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches community, and we have had so much fun collaborating on a number of fronts. Today, we're going to unpack this topic and get in the weeds around visual leadership. So let's all welcome Todd. Todd Cherches, welcome from New York.
Thank you, Lisa. Great being with you.
Well, it's great to be with you again as well. And by the way, we're welcoming people from around the world right now. We have Shivraj from India, Hilda's from Tanzania, Peggy from Boston, Terry from Southern California, Rose is with us from Connecticut, Bill, our sponsor, from Portland, Oregon, and the list goes on. So Todd, we're going to be taking lots of questions today. I can just tell.
It's nice to see some friends attending today. So hi to all my friends and new friends as well. So.
Let's talk for a minute about definitions, because you know Plato, who once said the path to wisdom begins with a common set of definitions.
That's true.
How did you come up with this term, visual leadership, and how do you define it?
Well, visual leadership is basically the application of visual thinking and visual communication to the world of management and leadership. But it's not just a leadership methodology. It's really about, it's a methodology we could all use, because the foundation is, how do we get people to see what we're saying? How do you get an idea out of your head and into someone else's? Marketers need to do that. Teachers need to do that. Coaches need to do that. Parents need to do that. We all need to do that, right? It's about influence. It's about communication. So that's the foundation, is using visuals as a metaphor. It's about seeing, looking, watching, noticing what's on your radar, and how do you get things out of your head and into someone else's. So that's basically the foundation. So long story short, I was an English literature major as an undergrad, focused on literature, and Shakespeare and poetry. And so much of that involves storytelling, metaphor, imagery, right? And then I worked in the TV industry for a number of years for CBS and Disney, developing TV shows out in LA, and that's a visual medium. So when I got into management and leadership, I took my background in visual thinking, applied it to management leadership, and then that's how visual leadership was born.
That's pretty exciting. And you have been all over the world. Was there something that happened when you visited China that gave you even more fodder for this great reference book and storybook that you published?
Yeah, when I was 30 years old, I got a job as a project manager at a theme park design company, and they shipped me off to Shenzhen, China, which is just over the border from Hong Kong. And this was back in 1992. So it was not the high-tech hub that it is today. It was agricultural and industrial. And I got there with 2 crew members to install this theme park attraction, these life-size robotic animal figures. And when we got there, we found that none of the workers spoke English, and we spoke no Chinese. And we just sat there staring at each other, saying, how are we going to communicate? And if you've seen the movie Cool Hand Luke, that famous line, what we have here is a failure to communicate. So what if we needed a hammer or a screwdriver or whatever? In fact, I have the sketch here. I just started drawing. So I just picked up a pen and just started drawing. So if I needed a hammer or a screwdriver, a nail, whatever, and I'm not a great artist, right? But that's not too bad for someone who has ICD, I can't draw syndrome. And that's basically what happened. It was basically turned into Pictionary and charades. It's like 2 words, sounds like screwdriver. So we were just using hand gestures and drawing, and we got it done. And when I got back, it hit me that we don't just communicate through words, especially if we're communicating across cultural lines or language barriers. Visuals is a great way to get our ideas across.
And yes, you had no understanding of the Chinese language, and there you were creating illustration. It was really the, invention being the mother of necessity, right? Or necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't see another solution other than I tried it, and it wasn't like planned or anything. I just started doing it, and then we kept doing it for the whole duration of that installation.
Yes, it's a pretty exciting adventure at age 30. And why is it? This is something that has been hounding me for a long time. You may not know this, but in my earlier career, I worked in the corporate software and enterprise software world. So I was a proud bag carrying salesperson, and we sold very expensive 6-figure software packages to large enterprises over the phone. This is before we had the ability to host Zoom meetings and share screens and do whiteboard and use Miro. And we had to explain how these really complex software products would help them run their data centers better, save money, prevent outages, etc. But boy, did we have a hard time explaining how they work to IT executives with the checkbooks. Yeah. Why is it that brilliant technicians and engineers have so much trouble applying visual leadership?
Yeah, I mean, it's a translation issue. One of the exercises I do in my NYU class, I teach leadership in the HR master's program, and we do an exercise where we come up with all the HR terminology that other parts of the company would have no idea what we're talking about. And then we do the same for marketing, technology, finance, etc. And then what we do is we say, how do you translate, just as you would translate English into Chinese or Spanish, how do you translate HR speak into marketing speak, into technology speak? And one of the ways to do that is you need to understand their mindset, know what makes them tick, what's the language they speak, what are the analogies that will resonate with them, or metaphors, or stories, or examples. And we need, so I sympathize with you having to sell. It's hard to sell intangible things if people can't picture in their mind's eye what you're even talking about, right? So that's one of the biggest challenges that marketers face and that we all face. So that is a skill. So we take in information visually, not only through our eye, but through our ear. So if someone tells you a story, we're picturing it. If someone uses a metaphor analogy, we're picturing it. So that's something I talk about too, that it's not just drawing and imagery and PowerPoint slides. It literally is speaking to someone in a visual way.
Yes. And by the way, I want to remind everyone who might be coming in a little bit late after their lunch hour that we're taking your questions. And we have Cheryl from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have Rose from Connecticut and Terry from Southern California. We have some other English majors in the room today,
Oh,
Todd,
yes,
speaking
majors.
of which.
I love that.
And that's pretty cool. And I really want to go back to something you said earlier that also has concerned me recently. And as you know, we have a group of senior marketing leaders with 10, 20, sometimes even 30 years experience. Many of them also English majors and graduates and multilingual. And we have been hosting a series of digital CMO planning sessions for our private member roster. And it's been very interesting. We have learned that there are 6 key talents that CMOs need to have in their talent pool in order to adapt to the new ways that customers buy. One of those 6 talents is storytelling.
Yeah.
Now, there are others such as data gathering, project management, data analysis, and so forth that you're probably very familiar with. And when I surveyed the entire group of CMOs and I said, which of these 6 talents are the most lacking in your organization? Do you want to take a guess which one it was?
I would guess storytelling.
Exactly. Now, again, I'm going back to what's all this dissonance we're seeing from really smart people who have gone up in the ranks in their organizations, but are hitting this visual storytelling wall.
Yeah, well, one of the key things about visual storytelling, when people say, what do you mean by visual storytelling as opposed to just storytelling? It's basically painting a picture with words. It's basically thinking about the who, what, when, where, why, and the how. It's basically almost as if you're creating a mental movie in someone's imagination so they can actually visualize. So if you're interviewing someone for a job and you say, well, tell me about a time you did this, you say, well, I was working here and this is what happened, and you're telling a story. And so often, I think one of the reasons that C-suite people struggle with storytelling is because they elevate it to this intangible, this impossible thing, instead of realizing we're all storytellers. Children tell stories, grandparents tell stories. If someone says, hey, Lisa, how was your day today? And you say, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. You're about to launch into a story, right? So stories have beginnings, middles, and ends. They have victims, villains, and heroes. There's usually a quest. There's usually a barrier obstacle. Then there's some kind of ending or resolution, good or bad, right? So one time I was doing a workshop for CEOs on visual storytelling, and the CEO said, I'm terrible at storytelling. I hate storytelling. And I said, well, why do you say that? And he told this amazing story about how he once told a story that bombed, right? So by putting that limitation on himself of I'm a terrible storyteller, he realized that he actually was that one time it bombed. So what? I mean, it happens, just like joke tellers could bomb as well. But that's the thing. It's like storytelling is innate to who we are. It's just they're emotional, they're memorable. So I think if we remove that stigma and that pressure, just share incidents and situations with people, and your stories will come to life, and you'll connect with people, and you'll get your ideas across more effectively.
Yes, language controls, as Alan Weiss says so prolifically, language controls discussion, discussion controls relationships, and relationships control the business. And by the way, Todd, I think you were part of that live stream a week ago where Alan Weiss was our guest.
Yes.
And we talked a lot about our mindset. It almost sounds to me as if visual leadership begins with having a certain mindset about what you're trying to convey. By the way, hello to one of my team members, Sharon from Maryland, who is a recovering engineer and agrees with the language translation. So glad you're here, Sharon.
That's great. But in terms of what you were saying about mindset, I didn't invent this, but mindset, tool set, and skill set, right? We need to have the mindset to think about it. We need to have the tool set to do it, and we have to have the skill set to use those tools, right? So whatever you do, you need all 3 of those things in order to be effective and successful. But it does start with mindset.
We always have one of these mindful marketer mic drop moments. And I think what you just said is really powerful.
Thank you.
It's around mindset, tool set, and skill set.
Yeah.
And Cheryl has read your book twice. So what
Cheryl's
can I say?
Cheryl's a good friend of mine. Her book's coming out pretty soon as well. So you'll have to have Cheryl on your show. Good to see you, Cheryl.
That sounds great. That sounds great. And let's make sure here, we've got lots of comments coming in. Always remember you can put your questions in the chat. We also have new rules of work that we're dealing with, Todd. You and I have had our share of Zoom meetings. Hybrid work environments are here to stay, and I'm going to just boldly say I believe that's the case. Now, how does that affect some of the principles and methods that you teach to your clients, to your students, and within your book?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. I just wrote an article for Inc. magazine called "Are You Ready for the September Shuffle?" September's almost over already. It's hard to believe, but I talk about the chaos, confusion, and conflict resulting from this hybrid working world. Some companies are saying, "All right, everyone back to the office," and a lot of employees are like, "I'm not going," or "I'm not going yet." Right? So there's a lot of, it's like herding cats. It's very challenging. How do you hire and onboard people effectively? How do you build teams and collaboration when some people are home, some people are in the office certain days? So it really is tricky and challenging. So much of a company's culture is how it feels when you're there in the office, right? The decor and I used to work for a company called LiquidNet that had a Wall Street company and a .com culture. So it's kind of like financial services, but with the ping pong tables and all that kind of stuff. When people are working from home, do people even care about if your company has a ping pong table anymore? Is that going to lure you in to come into the office, right? So everything has changed. So we need to create a new way to create culture and make everyone feel, diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging are such hot topics for a reason. They're so important. How do we create that collaboration and communication in a world where not everyone's in the same place at the same time? That's one of the biggest challenges that everyone faces right now. And using visual communication will help to alleviate that. You need to speak other people's language. You need to listen with empathy and compassion. So there's all of these ways of using visual leadership techniques to help be more effective in this new hybrid world that we're living in.
Yes, it's very true. And just the visual leadership that's required when you are sending out an email to someone. I'm sure you experience the same thing I do right now, Todd. Ever since my second book came out, and I've got hundreds and hundreds of posts on my blog. Oh my gosh, thank you, Todd. Thank you so much. And ever since, I'm kind of recognizable among business circles now, and I've been published in a number of publications like Fast Company. Every week I get a request from people saying, I just published my own book and I'd like to, here's a copy of my entire book. And I'd like you to read my book and post a review. And here are 75 tweets and LinkedIn posts you can share with your audience. Will you do that for me? And I want to let people know that if you want the opposite of visual leadership, send someone a 400-word unsolicited email asking them to invest 8 to 20 hours of their time for nothing, and see what kind of visual response you might get. And it might involve a certain hand gesture.
I love the visual. I love the visual because I could picture it. You didn't have to do it, but I could picture it in my mind's eye. So that's a great example of visual language communicating an image in words only.
Yes. As I say, please be laconic, not loquacious.
See, that's a good tweet to send out. Yeah. words to live by.
Rose, we know marketers and some executives, they do talk in industry speak, and even authors like myself have to be careful. And Todd, you're extremely glib and very articulate, but I catch myself sometimes using marketing speak, and I have to say, oh, okay, stop. I'm talking to a CEO.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to know all of this.
Yeah.
So
we always have to start with who's our audience and what's our purpose. It's not about us. It's like we know our stuff. We can't assume everyone speaks our language, understands the terminology, has our experiences. We're very clear. One of my friends, I just said this to my NYU student the other night. I said, write this down. People are not mind readers, right? If you just say, well, why didn't you do this? Or you should have known, or why didn't you just, if it was that simple, they would have, right? So if people are not clear on what you're saying, whose fault is that? I always say the burden of communication is on the communicator. And one of the stories I tell in my book called Ice, Rice, or Mice, I was in a restaurant, I needed more ice for my drink. And I said, can I have some more ice? And they brought me a bowl of white rice. right? I said ice, they heard rice. So part of it's my New York accent. I know I talk fast, but whose fault was that? So if I held up my glass and say, "Can I have some more ice?" They wouldn't have put rice in it, right? So just the visual of pointing can, overcome the auditory confusion that sometimes the filters that we have. And now with math on, we're going to do a whole conversation in my class just on the filters of math, right? How it impacts how we hear. We don't realize how often we read lips and how hard it is sometimes to understand people. You don't see a smile, right? So there's a lot of barriers to communication in all areas of our life. And, if we're aware of the visuals, then we can kind of find ways to counteract that or to overcome some of those barriers.
Yes. Now let's break some barriers together now, Todd. One of the things we like to do here is we like to provide lots of examples that people can use in their day-to-day lives. And again, our episode here today is sponsored by Leadership in Action, and Leaders in Action with Bill Connolly. And he has shared with us a video to have us give him some feedback on how you would answer to, or if you were advising him as a client, what you would say about this example of visual leadership. So I'm going to ask my producer, Stephen Kaplan, to show us that video, and then we'll chat further.
Is becoming more vital than ever. We have created a suite of studio tools that creates a breathtaking improvement over any webcam solution. Simple and efficient for everyday use while keeping the cost affordable. Bringing your audience a crystal clear image, stunning lighting, and professional quality sound. We also offer new custom designed printed backgrounds. These incredibly realistic prints allow you to escape the limits of your physical space and ensure your style and brand consistently shine.
All right, Todd, over to you. Where would you put that on the visual leadership scale?
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations. And that was visually beautifully done by Bill. So an excellent job. I love how he did the side-by-side before and after. It's like, how do you explain that over the phone? How do you explain that without, when you see it, it's right there, right? So that's why, they're saying a picture speaks 1,000 words, goes back centuries. Even the words video and visual have the same root. It's all about seeing, right? So when you have a before and after, whether it's a weight loss thing or, whatever, it just shows what's possible. Here's how things are, and here's how things could be better. So that's a big part of marketing and communication in every area. Here's the before, show me what the after is going to look like. And then there's a classic marketing acronym, I'm sure you know, AIDA: awareness, interest, desire, action, right? So people need to be aware of something, they need to be interested, then they need to want it, and then they want to say, all right, let's do it, right? But you need to take them through that phase. I think Bill did a great job of kind of leading us in that direction to show us what's possible.
I would weigh in on that video and just give it 2 thumbs up right now, because there are a couple of very subtle things that Bill did. And by the way, if you haven't met Bill Connolly yet, I call him the digital stylist to the stars. He's working with thought leaders and CEOs like Mark Thompson, and he's collaborated with Oprah. So he really understands digital styling in a way you and I may never understand. And one of the things I loved about his balance between the visual persuasion of the before and after was his use of music and voice. Yeah. And I think that the visuals led the way, and that the sound, the voice and the music were a complement to the visuals. Yeah. Have you noticed, Todd, you come from the advertising world. How annoyed do you get when you turn on a radio and an ad comes on and it blasts in your ears? Yeah. Or even television, which is why I no longer have television. The volume of the sound overpowers whatever beautiful imagery they put their time and millions of dollars into creating. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a learning theory called VARK, visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetic. And there's a mythology that we're one or the other, and we're not. The key is you can leverage all 4 of those sensory modalities to be more effective. So just like you're describing, Lisa. So visual is what are you seeing? Auditory is what are you hearing? reading and writing is whether the words are text, and kinesthetic is the movement, right? So when you're watching a video, so I think, again, Bill did a great job of weaving all four of those elements together in a really effective way where nothing was off-putting and it was really in sync with each other. So I thought that was really nicely done. So I think that's the key is, using all this. So even though visual leadership is my focus, I am aware of all the other senses. In fact, we're talking about my book is on an audio book as well, and there's a certain irony to listening to an audio to a book about visual leadership. So you're not seeing the images and everything. So, but again, we all take in information in different ways at different times. But when you use those in conjunction, it's really powerful. And there's one theory I just mentioned briefly in my book called dual coding theory, right brain, left brain. When we leverage both sides of the brain, when the words and pictures are in alignment, it's more powerful than either one or the other. So we want to always be thinking about that. Are we delivering our message in the most sensory effective way possible?
Yes, I love that. And we have a question here from Sharon in Maryland. Let's see what she's looking for. In addition to visual leadership, do you feel leaders have to listen more intensely in combination with storytelling now more than ever because we're working remotely?
Yeah, one of the things I say is that leaders not only need to be good storytellers, they need to be good story listeners. So I love that question by Sharon. Again, we need to listen. I call it flipping the eye. We take the eye on, like the cover of my book is a rainbow colored eye, which represents the fact that no one in the world sees the world through the same lens that you do. So that's where it starts. So when leaders have to realize that you're seeing the world from a unique perspective, then you need to flip the eye. You need to turn that eye around on yourself to look internally at your biases, assumptions, prejudices, filters, and you need to listen to other people. You need to pull out their stories and you need to hear what people are experiencing. Because otherwise, if you just put out edicts and memos and policies without any thoughts about who they're impacting or what your people want and need, it's a recipe for failure. So I definitely agree with Sharon's question that we need to be excellent listeners as well, and we need to hear. Peter Drucker famously said that the most important part of communication is to hear what isn't being said, and I think that fits into that concept.
Well, that's great. And we appreciate all of your questions here. We also have so many comments coming in that I want to remind you, you can post your questions anytime in the next 48 hours. And Todd and I will be sure to answer those that we didn't cover online. So Todd, talk to us about a new visual leadership insight you've gotten recently that you kind of wish had made it to your book.
Oh, that's a trick question I wasn't prepared for. But one is I just did a workshop in visual leadership in the age of this thing.
The C word.
That's wreaked havoc on our lives for the last year and a half. This thing is invisible to the eye, and yet look at its impact on the world, right? Think about the impact of other things in our lives that, just as a metaphor, those little things that we don't even see but have a tremendous impact. One of the things one time we were looking out the window, my wife said, "Wow, look at that wind." And it hit me that we can't see the wind, we can only see the trees swaying, right? So we can't always see our words, but we could feel the impact, right? So using that metaphor, it's like, what are we seeing and noticing? What's right in front of us that may be having a huge impact and effect, that we're not really aware of the root cause or what's going on. So that metaphor of COVID, it's like, what's that COVID in your life? Like, what's that thorn in your, that pebble in your shoe, that little thing that you don't even notice, but if you let it go on, it's going to blow out of proportion. So that's the first thing I thought of when you posed that question.
Yes, and by the way, Todd, we're having a little bit of a network delay on your side, and things are very blurry. So what we're going to do is have you come back into our green room, because your network is really slow, and your good-looking face is now very blurry.
Oh, really? I'm sorry about that. I don't know why that is. So let's see what we can do about that.
So Todd's going to come on back in now. While Todd is coming back in the room, I want to say hi to Cynthia Oreguba. And Cynthia had a question for us about how can you see Bill's video again? So first, let me say, Cynthia, welcome. Tell us where you're from. We always like to go back and see where are people from. and how many more people around the globe are we helping? And you can always go to toddcherches.com. And if you go on Google and search for visual leadership, you'll notice that it's very easy to find Todd's TEDx talk, not only on Google, but also when you visit his website, it will pop right up. And so Cynthia's in Los Angeles, so she is probably just getting ready for lunch. So thanks for being with us, Cynthia, and we hope you enjoy Todd's session. And Todd, you are back looking pretty clear at this point.
Okay, good. I have no idea why that happened. I have a pretty high-speed connection, so I have no idea what happens, but sorry about that.
And so Todd, tell us how you get inspiration from living in New York City. How has that been inspiring you as a visual leader?
Well, talk about overwhelming sights and sounds. I mean, the second you walk out of your apartment, you're surrounded by the sights and sounds of New York. So I think part of it is just the energy, and you go into Times Square and you're surrounded by all the billboards and the excitement. We're actually going to see Hamilton tomorrow night. My first show in probably 2 years, so we're looking forward to that. So, but that's probably being in New York is just feeding off the energy of being in the Big Apple.
Yes, and is there a particular place in Manhattan where you go to get some of that visual leadership inspiration or inspiration to coach your own clients?
Well, I'm a big history buff, so I love going downtown, and I love seeing the Statue of Liberty and the Brooklyn Bridge, because it's almost like time travel in a way, right? You can actually picture what it was like. There's a restaurant called Francis Tavern, which is where George Washington bid farewell to his troops at the end of the Revolutionary War, and it's still there. So it's like just to go down there and see the pictures, and it's just to me that's going back in time. My great grandmother was an immigrant from Russia who came in through Ellis Island. So just and just going down to the Lower East Side and going to places that my ancestors went to was that's one of those things that is inspirational.
That's great. And walking is just so easy to do in Manhattan. It's a very walkable city. Yeah. And I can't wait to be there. I'm going to be there in October for a show, because I wholeheartedly support the return of the cultural icon known as Broadway.
Great. And I hope we get to meet in person. Yes,
we will meet in person. And I find a lot of my inspiration comes from nature, because I am in this perfect storm known as Northern Virginia in the United States. And I can walk out my door and be on a beautiful trail next to the forest, or I can get in my car and be at one of the world's biggest international airports in 22 minutes. Wow. So I have lots of visual cues that give me inspiration to write books and my online learning courses and my keynotes with corporate clients. So it's very enjoyable.
Yeah. Our environments is so key, whether it's external or internal. It's good to have things around you, like that flower behind you, or just I have all my books behind me, things that stimulate ideas, that are catalysts for innovation. So what we surround ourselves with, and then going outside, like you said, whether it's a trail or a beach, those are all sources of inspiration and innovation.
Yes, and every one of us, if you can be in nature, which is, as you know from my book, The Mindful Marketer, a wonderful trigger for calming your soul and allowing yourself to ask what if, and to think strategically and to reflect, use that time for self-reflection. That's where your visual leadership ideas can be born.
Yes, definitely.
This is our final question, Todd, before we head out for the day. Is there a bad habit that you've seen in any of your clients or students that we all could work on?
That's a tricky question. I would say one bad habit is only seeing things from your perspective. We need to take out, just like if I took off my glasses and put on another pair of glasses, right? So just the seeing metaphor. Some people see things through rose-colored glasses. You only see the positives. You may be missing some of the negatives. So that's what I would say is try to change your perspective. Get outside yourself. One exercise I used to do for a workshop I was doing a workshop and we were coming up with like stale ideas. It was about leading innovation. And I actually had everyone get up and we walked down the block to a Barnes and Noble when they were still around. And then unfortunately, many of them are gone in New York. And we went to the magazine section, and the assignment was everyone had to buy a magazine that you never read before, or you wouldn't think of getting. So like this construction worker bought Bride magazine, and this fashion woman bought Guns and Ammo, and we all brought them back, and you had to actually look through there and find ideas that related to your business. And they were like, this isn't going to work. And they came up with hundreds of ideas just by getting out of their own industry, out of their own head, and looking to other areas. And it was interesting. So that was a visual that came back to me as I was thinking about examples, that flooded back to me as if it was yesterday. And that was probably 15, 20 years ago. So that's what I would say is get out of your own head, get out of your own environment, and look to nature or look to the city to find inspiration.
Well, Todd, I know one thing. You've been a real inspiration for me ever since I met you. And I'm still working on trying to keep up with you and your wild and vivid imagination. So I want to thank you so much for being with us today. We would love you back because I know, knowing you, you'll be working on another book or another TED Talk. Everyone, make sure you go to toddcherches.com and get a copy of Visual Leadership if you want to be a better communicator and capture the hearts and minds of your people, of your audience. Todd, have a great weekend in that amazing city, New York.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. It was great to see you.
See you later. And let me do my mindful moment now. This is the portion of our session where I look at what did we take away from today's session that we can put into place right away. And by the way, if you need to leave for lunch and you're on the lunchtime time zone, make sure that you have signed up for our show schedule going forward. We partner with LinkedIn Learning and our sponsors to bring you great content, actionable content, not bloviating content, but actionable content that you can use tomorrow or Monday in your job. All of these programs are also immediately transcribed into our podcast channel, The Mindful Marketer. So you can listen to us while you are outside walking or cooking dinner. Here are my 3 mindful moments. Number 1, we have to remember, even though we may be excellent at drawing, we have to also be excellent listeners and continue to hone those skills as best we can, no matter what the work environment. And the second is look around find your surroundings that give you joy and give you inspiration. For Todd Cherches, it was the Francis Tavern, just to name a few, because he's a history buff. For me, it is usually out in nature or a brand new city or country I haven't visited. And then finally, make sure you don't hide behind your glasses. Make sure you're able to take off your lenses and perspective and see the world through someone else's eyes. Wise words from the one and only Todd Cherches. And I hope you also walked away today with some new insights to be a better visual leader. And as we wrap up, I hope you'll plan on joining us again on October 1st. In the spirit of being mindful marketers, we also have to cultivate our careers. And on October 1st, we're going to have a top-notch, world-class executive recruiter, Erica Seidel, to give us some firsthand advice on how you can future-proof your marketing career. Get ready, because Erica understands the current state of recruiting. She is painfully aware of the 10.3 million job openings here in the United States and the sheer power and volume of job offers many of my clients are now getting. Unsolicited job offers, unsolicited calls from recruiters. So this is a great time to be a marketing professional, and you have to be strategic about it as you look potentially for other roles. Hilda, thank you for being with us today. Cheryl Johnson, all of you. My pleasure to be here as the host of the Mindful Marketer live stream. Until October 1st, stay mindful and make it a great weekend.